Hello everyone, I'm Raijin Rising, and as Volume 8 will in all likelihood not have time for less important things, let's take some time to think up some fun one-off side stories for a hypothetical anthology volume of RWBY. If you don't know, an anthology is basically not one large work, but a collection of shorter works. The RWBY Fairy Tales of Remnant book? That's an anthology of fairy tales. Volume 8 really won't have much time to breathe, but hey, once the show is over and the final credits of whatever volume that ends up being roll, there are so many smaller stories the show could tell. There are so many characters I'd love to see explored at a time when they might not have been relevant to the main plot. I should note that these are basically character shorts. I know that depending on who you talk to, the fandom overall seems to have a love-hate relationship with character shorts. I love them for what they can be, because regardless of the impact or lack thereof of the character shorts that were in volumes 4, 5, and 6, don't forget about volume 1. The color trailers were character shorts that introduced us to the world of Remnant, and an anthology volume at the end would do well in fleshing it out more. A collection of character shorts when the story is over doesn't interfere with anything. The story is over, and there's no RWBY volume that needs time and a budget, so character shorts would be wholly welcome. This idea splits off something that Red vs. Blue did. If you are unfamiliar, RWBY Season 13 is the end of a major narrative arc, the Chorus Trilogy, and Season 14, now that that story is over, is a collection of shorts, many of which are canon, but many of which are not, are just made for the fun of it. So in that same vein, after RWBY is over, why not do the same thing? Why not take some time to give screen time to characters who haven't had it in years maybe? Or who never made it too far beyond side character status? Or why not fill in the gaps between some of the show proper's scenes to get further to the root of what they were? Here are 5 fleshed out ideas for a hypothetical anthology volume of RWBY character shorts, and then I'll list off some smaller ones just for the fun of it. Number 1. RWBY's heroes have changed a lot since the beginning, so my first idea harkens back to Volume 1, when we were just getting to know them and when they were just getting to know each other, let alone themselves. This is when Sun meets Blake. So I want to know, the first gap I want this anthology volume to fill is what was Blake doing for an entire weekend with Sun back in Volume 1? RWBY says Blake has been gone all weekend. How exactly was she so silent for all of that? And what was the dynamic between Sun and Blake like that they were even together for that long to begin with while she was away from her team? Were they together the whole time, or did she stay near him a lot while mostly being by herself in that time? Blake is used to being mobile. She's used to being on the run. She grew up with the White Fang, so a mere weekend away from her bed isn't anything to her. If you read the RWBY After the Fall novel, you also know that Blake still had a more militant side back in those early days, so maybe we could see more of that and how Sun might have interacted with it. Sure, yes, RWBY saying that Blake was gone all weekend was a throwaway line meant to move things along, but now that the show has the opportunity to play in that space, I want to see more of it. Number 2, my second idea is not too far from the first. A little bit later in the Beacon arc, why not have a Weiss character short of her growing as a person and making the efforts to socialize to fit in with Team RWBY in Volume 2. This is very much a recurring thing in the volume itself, but it's more minor. So this could be a very extended cut of the Beacon dance prep scene with Yang. They argue about decorations, and it could start from there. Perhaps Yang says Weiss is so out of touch because no student from Beacon would want doilies. And Weiss would say, as she says at the end of the Torchwick mech fight, "At least I'm trying to fit in with you people." Yang could take the hint and talk more seriously about Weiss's disposition, and then they challenge themselves. They try to get to the level of friendship where they can quote-unquote have a conversation about nothing, just be on a similar wavelength. but of course, that fails, and inevitably it leads to their worries about Blake's destructive stubbornness. And that conversation could, in turn, lead to more Bumblebee buildup. I mean, Yang has definitely shown a lot of it through the volumes, and more wouldn't hurt. So you see, there is a lot of opportunity in really any volume to just expand upon what is already there and bring it to light. Because for something like Weiss's character arc in Volume 2 being more in the background, putting that to the forefront would help us appreciate her character a heck of a lot more, especially for where she goes after that. My third idea is somewhat out there, and depending on where the show goes, it might not be necessary, but it's a space I want to play in nonetheless. ILIA. Volume 5 was ILIA's time to shine. I've said this. Volume 5 spends an incredibly long time on ILIA's character, the Blake character short, as well as a good amount of scenes throughout the first act. If I'm honest, it seems like the plot gives ILIA almost as much time as Raven, or at least for how much Yang drives Volume 5, ILIA is right there with her. So it was incredibly odd to me at the time that Volume 5 spends so much time developing ILIA's character and then leaves her to the side. I assume the development is there for a foundation when the show brings her back, and that leaves a middle space for an anthology chapter to play in. She could be this sort of adopted Belladonna daughter working with Gira and Kali in Mistral. Perhaps much of the anthology chapter is ILIA opening up to Kali. I mean, Gira's likely not going to be as receptive. Granted, a lot more receptive than most dads, but still not as receptive. So Kali lends her ear. ILIA opens up about her side of things with Adam and probably believing Adam is still out there, even though he's either dead or soon to be. She could tell stories of herself and Blake as children growing up together, and that would give us the opportunity to see a childhood character model of not only her, but Blake's rendered out in 3D. Personally, I just always really liked ILIA as a character. She is Blake if Blake stayed with the White Fang, and we could watch her unlearning the destructive behaviors that Blake had to unlearn. Plus, more ILIA content is just always good by me. For my fourth idea, aside from spending more time with certain characters or certain time frames, why not use the anthology volume as an excuse to spend more time in a certain place? For as long as the show spent in the city of Mistral, it was all in the same places. So why not spend a chapter exploring the various levels of Mistral? The show paints Upper Mistral as a place of high culture, the arts, fashion, that sort of thing, with the lower sides being seedy if not downright criminal. Cinder meanders throughout Lower Mistral and Crow has his rough day there too, but Upper Mistral? Aside from the Academy, it's never seen. Maybe the heroes pass that month of time by taking on missions. Of course, they're not licensed to, but what if they did one anyway, as they very much would? I mean, they don't care about rules, they do things quote-unquote our way. So maybe a bounty mission requires them to gain intel from certain people in the upper echelons, and they all split up for that, and we see a bunch of varied settings before they come together and use that intel to root out the person from Mistral's underbelly. It'd be nice as well for maybe the Spider Group to make background cameos, if not be involved fully in some surprise twist. I mean, heck, maybe defected spiders are the informants, and Lil Miss is the target, and we get a fight scene with her. Alternatively, the show could use this to tie into the Grimm campaign, Rooster Teeth's Dungeons & Dragons style show that has all its own characters and is set in Mistral prior to the main timeline of the show. For people who've watched that, maybe the heroes target someone who remained at large at the end of the campaign, or maybe someone else. Maybe someone from Team Sapphire is one of the informants. I must admit, I have not seen it. I've heard good things. It's all canon, so it would work. It would feel another level of rewarding for people who had watched that show. Like, oh, these people are from that other thing. But whatever it is, I would love to see an as above, so below type of bounty mission throughout the city of Mistral. And an anthology volume would be the perfect excuse. For my fifth and final, larger, more fleshed out idea, here's again the thing about that RWBY anthology season. It's not all canon. A good chunk of it was made purely for the fun of it, and before I list a bunch of quote-unquote throwaway short ideas, I want to shed light on one that was almost canon. So, in RWBY, almost every important idea that gets cut from one volume makes it into the next one or one down the line. For instance, the Volume 6 Director's Commentary says that Maria was cut from Volume 5, so she had to be introduced at the very beginning of Volume 6. But it's almost every idea that makes it in. This fifth idea is an idea that got cut from Volume 3. I'll throw it to Miles and Carrie to explain.
Was there anything on the cutting room floor that had to stay there and just because it didn't work for either time or...
There's actually another fight originally in Chapter 5.
In the doubles rounds.
During the doubles rounds. It was Sun and Neptune versus Pyrrha and Nora.
And that was, without question, one of the most painful things to have to cut.
Yeah.
Oh!
It really came down to the fact that the fight had absolutely no relevance to the plot at all.
Yeah.
And we were already, like, we went over our page count on just about every episode. We just had to bite the bullet and cut that fight, which was a bummer. We had some fun stuff with Neptune in there, with the whole water thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So the one like super cool looking biome that we see in the background of the Penny fight, there's an anti-grav biome. The one that looks super futury. It's like blocky with like running lights on it.
It was anti-grav, swamp, ice. No. Was it ice? Yeah, no, it was ice. It was ice. And I don't remember what the fourth one was. They never really got into that section.
I think it was like desert.
I think it was desert, but we never used the desert in that fight.
A fight of Pyrrha and Nora versus Sun and Neptune. Now that there's not the pain of an entire volume bursting at the seams behind this fight, it'd do well to finally be included. From the way they talked about it, the entire fight was written, voiceover was done, storyboarding and previs likely as well based on the fact that the biomes were chosen. A serious amount of effort went into this fight scene already, so why not finish what they started? Now, obviously it would be much different from what it would have been had it made it into Volume 3. At the very least, Rooster Teeth Animation came into existence with Volume 3, meaning it was just starting to hire a slew of people and come into its own as a studio. RWBY as a show has made a crazy amount of pipeline changes, and many amazing animators have come and gone since Volume 3 alone. But now they get to decide ultimately the best way to do the fight without being bogged down by the rest of the show. Granted, yes, this would still be in a volume of many other episodes, but so much more TLC would be able to go into this, especially considering the size of RT animation nowadays. And if they wanted to go the extra mile, they could animate the entire thing in Poser. But I seriously doubt they would do that to themselves. I doubt anyone there wants to go through that, even if they have all the assets from back then. Still, it wouldn't be very RWBY for the Anthology volume not to have a fight scene, and a tournament fight would fit in very nicely. But while we're making an entire Anthology volume, we might as well play around. Why not have a chapter dedicated to Volume 7 Thirsty Mom escapades? You might say this joke was drawn out enough, and to that I ask, was it? Was it really? We could finally get our beach episode, where the heroes return to Argus in the summer and take a dip. Or how about a Beacon era episode where Nora acts as a personal trainer for Team Juniper and pushes a workout session to the limit? Or a whole episode dedicated to the one, the true, the German for two, the good boys, why? Yeah, RWBY Chibi gave him the screen time for his antics, but that's not the same. And I'm certain the Anthology volume would have the time for an Atlesian shopping montage, or an Atlas ball, or Nora could pay a visit to her sickly old grandmother. Anything is possible. Seriously though, if they poked fun at the fandom in this, that would be the best thing ever. Like, I kid, but RWBY is a show with an honestly insanely large cast of characters in such a rich world. I mean, look at them. Any number of these secondary characters could get more screen time, and the main characters could get more screen time interacting with some that they otherwise just might not have. Maybe some scenes from the Team Coffee books could be turned into a chapter, or we could see some of John's early life with his sisters, or see Ren and Nora grow up together as children. Or, since Torchwick and Pyrrha are both so beloved, why not make something up for them, if there is anything left of their story to tell? The only caveat to this, the only thing I wouldn't want to be an anthology chapter under normal circumstances, unless they really are not explored at all in the show proper, is Team Stark. The best way of putting this is I do not want them to be quote-unquote relegated to a side story. At the moment, the way the writing has gone, Team Stark seems to me like they should be a lost fable, basically, as if they're really on that scale that a whole episode, or at least a solid chunk of one, should be dedicated to their story. If enough Team Stark content happens in the show proper, after that it would be okay for an anthology chapter to fill in the smaller gaps left behind, but it shouldn't only happen in a side thing. Okay, that's enough from me. I do enjoy making this kind of brainstormy video from time to time, just indulging in fun ideas for the show. And if you like this sort of thing, check out a video I made about Volume 9 potentially being entirely about Team Stark, based on fan theories that stemmed from something Miles said. It's all explained there. Other than that, Volume 8 is in full swing, and I'm making content all the way through it. Chapter reviews, shitposts as the ideas come to me, and the occasional video like this one when I can find the time. So like and subscribe for more. Keep up with me on Twitter as well, where I'll discuss some smaller things about the volume as it comes, as well as meme as often as possible. Thank you for indulging in my fanfic ideas. I hope to see you next time. I'm Raijin Rising. Have a good one.